Okay, so I have another SX-64 here that I just got. So got everything hooked up, and let's take a look at this thing together. So for one, that was an interesting thing. The disc was put in upside down and it looks like it was notched on both sides. So we'll take a look and see what's on there. Always curious to see what I find. So what we've got going on here is a blank screen. So what does that mean? You've seen many of my videos already. That kind of points to a PLA. So let's get down to it and attack this thing and see what's up. All right. So first things first, I'm gonna disconnect this keyboard here. We'll come back to that. Okay. So we've got the usual suspect of screws that we need to take out. Okay, let's get a little bit closer here. So the chip we want to take out is this second one from the top here. And in looking at it, I'll take it out, but in looking at it, I can see it's not the original chip. So someone obviously has been in here trying to fix this thing. So let's get down and dirty here. Get this chip out of here. All right. So here's the chip we took out. Definitely not the original chip. The original chip would have been a MOS chip. So let's go ahead and test this thing. I already got the tester already prepped here. And so pop this guy in there. Yeah, PLA is a good chip, so it's not the PLA. So let me put the PLA back, and then let's see about putting dead test cartridge on here. Okay, let's get this thing back in. Okay, the PLA is back in. I'm going to just reseat a little bit of these cards here. Someone's been in here because look at this. We've got, oh, interesting. This goes inside. I didn't notice it earlier, but we've got a reset switch. And this reset switch comes back into here. Why? From what I can see, there's two other wires that are coming in here. One of these, look at this. One of these wires is bare. Look at that. And I see it goes to the speaker. I see. So this is coming and it's going to a jack up in the front here. So this is going to the speaker and it's going to, I guess, the amp, and it's coming here, and there's a jack here, so I'm assuming they put a jack here for an external speaker. Oh my God. Seriously? Okay. So we'll have to do something about this as well. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think any of those things really make the blank screen, so to speak. I'm going to, let's put in the dead test cartridge and see what happens. And I'm also going to see about putting in a game cartridge. Okay, so let's plug this thing back in. Let's put in, first of all, let's go ahead and put in the game cartridge. I'm going to put Kickman in. This will tell us if there's something up with the ROMs or not. Let's start with that. We'll turn this guy on and see what we have. Okay, so it looks like I got a Kickman screen. Looks good too. So what this tells me is that we might have an issue with one of the ROMs, and first suspect is going to be the kernel ROM. So let's go ahead and take the kernel ROM out and test that and see what we've got here. All right, so let's go ahead and take the Kickman cartridge out and turn this thing around. I'll plug this thing. The kernel ROM is right next to the SID and the PLA chip. It's the one in the middle. So let's see if we can get this situated a little better so we can. Okay, so the kernel ROM is the second chip down. So here's the SID chip over here, and the kernel ROM is right next to it here. And in this case, you also have to be careful when you take this out. The kernel ROM, the base of the ROM chip is all the way to the end of the sockets, but there's two sockets free on this, on each side. So you got to make sure that you situate the ROM back correctly when you're putting this back. So let's go ahead and take this ROM out and give it a quick test. Okay, so that is the kernel ROM. So let's go ahead and get the tester out and see what we've got. Okay, so we've got the tester here already set up for the kernel ROM. So let's go ahead and put this guy in here and see what we've got. Immediate fail. I'm going through 4 passes already, so we know that the kernel ROM is bad. So let me get a kernel ROM chip in here and see about replacing that. Okay, so fortunately I'll have a lot of kernel ROMs, stock ones, because I replaced them all with Jiffy DOS. So let's see if this one is good here. Okay. Trying to get this focused here. There we go. All right, so this is a good kernel ROM. So that's what we're going to put back in. Now remember, there's going to be 2 pins open towards the front, towards pin 1, because the socket is a 28-pin socket, but the ROM is a 24-pin ROM. So let's keep that in mind. All right, so let me get around here. I'm going to get this popped back in there. Make sure all the pins are aligned. All right. Okay, so let's turn this on now and see what happens here. Okay, here we go. Okay. The kernel ROM has been replaced, but now we have on the screen just a little exclamation point kind of thing in the middle. So let's keep going and popping out the ROMs. That could even be a CIA chip. So we'll keep going down the rabbit hole here. So what I'm going to do before I start taking out ROMs, I put in the kernel ROM that was bad, but there was a lot more sound coming out. And what I usually do is take out the SID chip to protect it, which I didn't do on this. So I'm going to go ahead and take the SID chip out. And I'm not going to bother turning this thing around. I'm just going to go ahead and take this thing out. And then let's test it again before I go through this whole rigmarole, turning this thing around a million times. Okay, because the sound was so weird after I put that kernel chip back in, I went ahead and took this SID chip out. This was in it. So let's test this without the SID. And let's turn this on one more time, because the SID chip can also make things bad, and that's why I usually take the SID chips out of the computers before I even start doing anything with them, because one, I want to protect the SID chip if it's still good, because they're so sensitive. But the other reason is because sometimes they do make an issue of things. So turn this thing on. There you go. So sure enough, we had a bad kernel, which we replaced, and the SID was causing that white screen. Like I said, when the SID was in there, the sound after I replaced the kernel you know, got janked up a notch or two. Just didn't sound right. So anyways, and like I said, I usually take the SID chips out first. I should have done that. But sure enough, let's replace the SID here and see if this makes all our problems go away. Okay, so let's just go ahead and test this SID chip. I already set up the tester for it, just to double check. Sure enough, no surprise. The whole thing is pretty bad across the board there. So I'm going to replace it with an ARM SID. It's my SID chip of choice. Been using them for a while. I ordered them by bulk because I replaced so many of them. So bear with me. I'm just going to go ahead and put this in off camera here. All right, so let's take a quick peek. There we go, and that's with the SID chip in. So let's do a real quick diag test on it. All right. So it looks like we got this thing going again. So the SID and the kernel were the issues. One thing I get asked a lot is, as you saw the diag cartridge works, one thing I get asked a lot is, hey, does the C64 dead test cartridge work on an SX-64? So I just plugged in a dead test cartridge in here. Let's take a quick gander at that. So there you go. There'd be no reason for it not to, especially since the diag test works, but we'll let this go through its thing. And then let's go ahead and test the keyboard out and see how bad that is. Okay, so there's the infamous sound test. And we can let that go. So you see that the dead test does work, and it should. I mean, you know, there shouldn't be much difference between the 64, the SX, and the Commodore, you know, especially if you run the same software on it and stuff. So anyways, all right, let's see how bad this keyboard is. Let's get this thing hooked up. Okay, while I'm hooking up the keyboard, should make note that when I said that dead test works, I mean, it goes through all of the checks and everything, but I think you heard that the voice is accelerated. So that's the one thing that's off with that. So, but the tests all should still work. So there's no reason I can see why you wouldn't be able to use it. All right, so got the keyboard here. Let's see how bad this is, because you know how these keyboards are. Okay. Ooh, yeah, there's the key, number 4 key. Yeah, you have to really hit these things. That fork, there you go. Once it gets going, it's like as if it hasn't been used for a while, that membrane kind of gets stuck. Because now there's the 4 key. So this membrane will need cleaning, replacing. Okay, so we know what to do with the keyboard. I have a video already on how to replace the membrane, so we won't go through that. But let's see if we can read these discs, or this disc anyways that this came with. And it basically looks like it's both sides. Okay. Good, the drive works. That's nice. Okay, Bazooka, Skyset. So this looks like some kind of cool game. Let's see what's on the other side. Okay, the other side says Sky Shark Wares, and says something like Raccoon or something like that. I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to read it. But great, well, we obviously know that the disk drive works, so that's good news. The bottom line, as far as this video is concerned, you don't need to see me go and put this thing all back together, is you got a blank screen. It wasn't the PLA, which it normally is. It turned out to be two things. The Kernel ROM was bad, and the SID chip was bad. And remember, when you're dealing with 64s and the SX or the Commodore or the bread bins, whatever, like I said before, I always take the SID chip out. I didn't in this case, you know, I should have, but that's the first thing I do because it narrows a lot of stuff down. In this case, you know, if we would have left it in, we could have been chasing our tails, looking at ROMs, RAMs, all this other stuff, you know, so easily eliminate it. The other thing that you saw in here is that I narrowed it down to the ROM without test equipment just by using the Kickman cartridge. You know, I think you can also use Jupiter Landing. Basically, they don't rely on the ROMs, you know, for those games. So that way, you know, if the cartridge works, that means all the surrounding circuitry pretty much is working, which narrows down your issue to one of the three ROMs, and it's usually the kernel. So anyways, there you go. Hope you got something out of this. And, you know, like I always say, live for today, enjoy life. Peace out.